This video is part of our series on composting. To learn about other composting methods, follow the link in the video description. Vermi-composting is a simple technology for converting biodegradable waste into organic manure with the help of redworms, Isonia fodita. Vermi-compost is a high-quality soil enhancer valued by farmers for its high porosity, aeration, drainage, water holding capacity and microbial activity. Before we demonstrate how to make vermicompost, let's briefly look at how this method compares to traditional composting and which one is right for you. Vermicomposting generally requires less labor. Unlike in hot composting, there is no need to turn the pile. Vermicomposting tends to be faster than traditional composting. Depending on the method, traditional composting generally takes more than 3 months, while vermicomposting in the Hindukush-Himalaya region starts yielding compost after 5 weeks. Vermicompost tends to contain significantly more nutrients compared to traditional compost and has longer lasting effects on soil health. Traditional composting, on the other hand, may be a better choice if you have large quantities of organic material to be composted, as vermicompost uses less material in relatively shallow vermi pits. Traditional composting is also somewhat less technically challenging to implement and fewer things can go wrong in the process. Furthermore, traditional composting has lower upfront establishing costs, as for vermicomposting, you need to construct a pit and purchase earthworms, if not harvest it in the wild. On the other hand, vermicompost commands a significantly higher price when sold commercially, potentially making it a worthwhile investment for smallholders. Under ideal conditions, such a pit will produce approximately 1000 kg of vermicompost. In the HKH region, it is best to start a pit in the summer. First, you'll need to construct a pit for the vermicompost pile. There are only few requirements for a good worm pit, the most important being good ventilation. The pit needs to be wide and shallow to prevent heating of the compost pile, which could kill the worms. For this video, we have constructed a low-cost pit constructed with bricks in our moist and shaded site. Our pit is 3 meter long, 1.25 meter wide and 1 meter high. If bricks are unavailable, you can use stones for the pit construction. Alternatively, a wooden, bamboo or plastic box can be used. If possible, build a thatched roof over the pit to maintain temperature and moisture. The ideal temperature range for the vermicompost system is 19 degrees Celsius to 29 degrees Celsius. Composting worms can resist temperatures greater than that for short periods of time, but may die if exposed to such temperatures for an extended period. The next step after building the vermi pit is to obtain worms to populate it. Since all worms digest organic matter, in principle, any type of worm can be used. However, not all worms are equally well adapted to live in pits, since they prefer living deep in the soil, while others are better adapted to living closer to the surface. The red worm, which we use in this video, is ideal for vermicomposting because its natural habitat is close to the surface and it is accustomed to a diet rich in organic matter. So how many worms do you need? In the Hindukush-Himalaya region, we recommend to use half a pound of red worms per square meter of pit surface area. You can either buy them from an aggregate or vermicompost dealer or collect them in nature. After obtaining the worms, the next step is to collect composting materials. Let's briefly discuss which ones to choose. Compost worms digest just about any type of organic matter, but they prefer high amounts of carbon than is typical for traditional composting. Organic waste such as manure, kitchen waste, coffee grounds, and freshly cut grass contain lots of nitrogen. Such biomass needs to be balanced out with materials that contain high amounts of carbon such as straw, paper or fallen leaves. For our pile, we are using cow dung and pre-composted leaf litter. You could alternatively use uncomposted biomass, but this would require more worms per surface area and thinner layers in the compost pile. Once the composting materials are collected, we stack them up in layers in the vermi pit. We will use alternating layers of leaf litter and manure. Start by covering the base of the pit with a 10 cm thick layer of sand to facilitate drainage. For this, as well as for all following layers, take care to evenly spread out the added material so as to create a flat surface. Next, add a 15 cm thick layer of cow dung followed by a third layer of 80 cm of leaf litter. For the fourth layer, add another 15 cm of cow dung and then finish up the pile by covering it with a 5 cm layer of soil. Having built our compost pile, the next step is to moisten it with water until it reaches a moisture content between 70 and 85%. An excessively wet or dry pile can kill the worms or drive them out of the pile. One way to check if the pile's moisture is correct is by taking a handful of the top layer material and squeezing it in a fist. A little water should drip out. If a lot of water comes out, the pile is too wet. If no water is squeezed out, it is too dry. The next step is to place the worms on the top of the pile. After we place the worm, we put bamboo stakes across the pit and cover it with gunny bags. The next step in the vermicomposting process is to maintain the moisture content of the pile by regularly applying water. The appropriate frequency of watering depends on the season and your local climate. In the mid-hill areas of the Hindukush-Himalaya region, this will usually mean watering the pile once to thrice a week. After about 35 days, the top layer of the pile will be ready for harvesting, while the lower layers continue to compost. Here is how you can tell whether the first layer is ready to harvest. The first indicator is the presence of granules of earthworm castings, vermicompost on the top of the pile. A second indicator is the texture and color of the layer. It should be moderately loose, crumbly with dark brown color. It should be granular, lightweight, and humus-rich and must have a uniform texture throughout. Once the compost is ready, stop watering for 2 to 3 days before harvesting your top layer. This will make the worms burrow down into the lower layers. We then harvest the top layer by piling it up in small mounds along the corners of the pit. The mounds should roughly be 15 cm in both height and diameter. The sun exposure and reduced moisture will make the worms leave the mounds within 1 day. Remove the piles of compost and store them. Your pile at this stage will yield roughly 5 kg of vermicompost per day. Wait for the next layer to be fully composted and determine its harvest time in the same way as for the first layer. Repeat this process until you are left with a thin layer thickly populated with worms. Store the worms in a moist jute bag for later use. The vermicompost is so rich in nutrients that it should be mixed in a 1:4 ratio with soil. Do not allow it to dry out before using.